Welcome to Astrophotography Japan. In the last 2 years, I have done enough deep sky imaging that I understand the reliance and relationship astrophotography has with environmental conditions and the seasons. The depth of this relationship is not something that is obvious to newcomers or those just thinking about getting involved with this hobby. The what, when, and how of deep sky imaging are all critical considerations that are influenced by many factors. What you can photograph, when you can photograph it, and how you do it are all acquired knowledge that comes primarily through experience, trial and error, or watching YouTube videos like this. In my early days of this hobby, I pretty much learned everything about astrophotography from YouTube. What, when, and how are all multifaceted considerations dictated by your location and terrain, the local light pollution, the equipment you have in your possession, the time of year, the moon on that given night, and the local weather including clouds, temperature, humidity, wind, and more. Unless you live in a desert climate like Arizona or parts of California, for instance, truly good nights for astrophotography can be rather rare. I have missed many transient celestial events, such as conjugations, eclipses, comets, supernova, meteor showers, and others due to uncooperative weather. And there are many dimly glowing deep sky targets that I am incapable of imaging under my Bortle Class 7 or 8 skies here in Yokohama, Japan. So far this year, I've been greatly disappointed in the opportunities presented for deep sky imaging due to the lack of clear skies in the Kanto region of Japan here around Yokohama. In the early months of last year, I clearly remember many more nights suitable for astrophotography than this year in 2023. Recently, during the month of May, I was so deprived and desperate to get out under the stars that I attempted some galaxy imaging during a night with nearly a full moon. It turns out I was reasonably successful and enjoyed the challenge. But it was critical to strategically plan the imaging session in advance to maximize the possibility for success. So this video is an example of making the most of unfavorable conditions by using logic and technology despite the obstacles thrown at you by Mother Nature. The reality of the situation is that for most of us, times like these are far more common than ideal nights for astrophotography. So stick around if you are curious about my efforts and the images. Out here tonight at my favorite imaging place, Kawawa Fuji Park. It's about 12:30 at night, so it's getting fairly dark now. I just finished taking about 20 minutes of photos of the M92 Globular Cluster. And this is the Golden Week period during Japan, so it's in early May and there's nearly a whole week off from work and school. Unfortunately, tonight we've got a nearly full moon, and that seems to be the trend lately, that the only clear nights are when the moon is bright. Well, my main target for tonight is actually the fireworks galaxy, and I selected that one because it's over here in the northeast or so, and far away from the moon, and I'm using a moon filter here on my telescope as well. We're working with the SVBony SV508 80 ED scope here at 448 millimeter focal length with an ASI 678 MC planetary camera. So I'm going to switch over now to the fireworks galaxy, and let's see if we can get some good images of that tonight. As I mentioned, I selected a galaxy as my main target for tonight. Specifically, I decided to target the fireworks galaxy, NGC 6946. At my latitude, this is a circumpolar deep sky object. On this date in the spring, I had to wait until well after sunset to begin imaging the target. That's because it does not rise to a reasonably high altitude until after midnight. And here in Yokohama, based on my experience, it is best not to image anything below 35 degrees altitude due to the ambient glow of the city lights. Unless, of course, you have no choice to capture that object. On this particular night of May 5th, since I arrived at the park rather early, and executed my setup at a record pace, I had a little extra time to image something else before targeting the fireworks galaxy. And it happens that also in the north was a cluster that I had never photographed before, the M92 Globular Cluster. According to the Sky Safari 7 application, M92 was already up at about 60 degrees altitude to the northeast. Interestingly, I have been using Sky Safari for over 2 years now, but it was not until recently that I noticed an application under the selection menu called Measure From. With this handy little app, I was able to determine that the M92 Globular Cluster was located across the sky about 70 degrees of arc away from the moon, as shown in this screen-captured illustration. It also tells you that the two objects are about 27,000 light-years distant from one another across the expanse of our Milky Way and deep space. Here are a couple views of the imaging rig I used, pointed up over 60 degrees toward the M92 Globular Cluster on that night. As you can see here, the imaging train includes a 2-inch ZWO filter drawer upstream of the ASI 678 MC planetary camera. On this night of nearly a full moon, I decided to try the SVBony Moon filter to cut down the background ambient glow. The wavelength transmission profile of this filter is shown here. Actually, this filter was not necessary for imaging the M92 Globular Cluster because it's so bright, and in fact, a better choice may have been the UV IR cut filter, because in retrospect, I learned that the SVBony Moon filter has a high transmittance of the infrared color range. It is known that most camera sensors can register IR light photons, and in astrophotography this can cause star images to appear larger just a bit, whereas an IR cut filter is known to give more pinpoint stars. This effect is subtle, but I hear it is real. Perhaps I will test that someday. At the time of imaging, the M92 Globular Cluster was over 60 degrees in altitude and moving up toward the zenith. Here is the image that I captured. And these are the details. M92 is located in the constellation of Hercules. It is a very bright globular cluster that shines at magnitude 6.4. It is often overlooked because it is located quite close to the more well-known cluster of M13. M92 has an angular diameter of only 14 arc minutes, and as I already mentioned, is about 27,000 light-years away. Its size is around 100 light-years in diameter, with a mass of about 330,000 suns, and is approaching us at about 112 kilometers per second. The cluster is believed to be exceptionally old, since it has very little content of elements heavier than iron, and therefore must have been formed before the gas and dust of our galaxy was enriched from cycles of repetitive star birth and death. In this respect, it is similar to M13 and believed to be around 12 billion years old. It was now after midnight, and to my surprise, a group of high school boys, I'm guessing, came out for some late-night volleyball fun and practice. 20 meters down below me, down on the grassy field of Kawawa-Fuji Park, they seemed to be enjoying themselves under the park lights. I next turned my attention to NGC 6946, the fireworks galaxy. I had never imaged this deep sky object before. It was reported to have a magnitude of 9.6, which is not very bright, but within the range of my f5.6 imaging setup. As seen here in the Stellarium snapshot, it was around 37 degrees altitude at half past midnight on this date. Still a little low, but I wanted to get started. The main question was whether the moonlight was going to interfere with my imaging attempt of this dim object. The Sky Safari app told me the moon was located 104 degrees away, which was quite distant, so I felt there was a chance for success. After imaging for about an hour, I decided to take a series of long exposure photographs of my telescope setup. And having then viewed these photos, I noticed that my eyes had deceived me. What I thought were clear skies above actually had quite a bit of high cloud cover, as was revealed in these snapshots. Bummer. This was most certainly going to have a negative impact on the overall imaging clarity. Oh, by the way, these iPhone long exposure images, most being 2 to 5 seconds, were taken with my new iPhone app called Easy Long Exposure Camera. I'm not saying this is the best app for this purpose. I'm just saying that I like it. It is inexpensive, only a few bucks, takes nice images, and is very simple and intuitive to use. It gets the job done. From 12:36 a.m., I managed to capture 1-minute images for about 2 straight hours. Under that nearly full moon, I worried that any longer than 1 minute would result in non-ideal overexposure of the sensor. Also, it's worth noting on this Sky Safari simulation that the fireworks galaxy is quite close to the Milky Way galactic plane. This puts it nearby to the glow of the Milky Way, which originates from gas and dust and refracted and reflected starlight. Here is the fully processed image on the data I collected that night. This is the best I could do with the 102 minutes of raw data. I admit it is a rather poor image, and of course I was not satisfied with it. So over the following few weeks, when I had some rare clear nights, I tried again to image the same target. This time, for convenience, I set up the same exact imaging rig in my backyard. Unfortunately, based on its location in the northeast sky, the fireworks galaxy needed to climb above 53 degrees in altitude before it was visible above my rooftop. And at this time of year in mid-May, at my latitude, it only achieves that from about 2 a.m. That means I could only manage a maximum of 1.5 to 2 hours exposure time before the morning twilight began to interfere with the image capture. Nevertheless, over the course of 3 nights, I captured and stacked 127 good quality 2-minute images. It was possible to bump up my exposure time on these 3 nights for several reasons. Firstly, the moon phase on those nights were significantly less bright, and it was rising later and later until the last 2 nights were when the crescent moon had barely risen above the horizon. In fact, on May 17 and 18, the moon probably had very little impact on the imaging. Here is a screenshot from my ASI Air in the preview mode after a 2-minute exposure on the fireworks galaxy. It is barely visible in this single unprocessed image, but of course the annotation function correctly identified it from the local star pattern. And this screenshot was taken with the histogram light meter engaged at the bottom. Notice of the maximum 65,000 units exposure level, the image achieves 28,000 units, which is less than half of that maximum. This range, about half the max, is about right for processing and achieving an optimal signal-to-noise ratio in the final image. Previously on May 5th, under the 99% moon, I was getting a similar mid-range level for the image reading, about half the maximum, but that occurred with only a 1-minute exposure due to all the moonlight. Now, let's compare the 2 images of the fireworks galaxy that I developed in early and mid-May. On the left is the image taken on May 5th under the bright moon and with some high overcast clouds and short exposure time with an IR pass moon filter. And the image on the right was taken with an IR cut filter and contains over twice the data, 254 minutes compared to 102 minutes. And the skies were more clear and the moon was much less bright during all 3 of those imaging nights of combined data. The image on the right was also easier to process. The stars appeared much smaller and tighter. The nebulosity showed more fine detail and is perhaps even slightly more luminous, even though I purposely was conservative in adjusting the brightness to keep the image more natural looking. This one I am quite satisfied with. The fireworks galaxy, also known as NGC 6946, is a spiral galaxy on the border between the constellations of Cepheus and Cygnus. It occupies 11.4 by 10.8 arc minutes of sky, and at a distance of 22 million light-years, this galaxy is relatively nearby, but not a member of the Milky Way's local group. This beautiful spiral galaxy spans about 40,000 light-years across, or half the size of ours, and is seen through a foreground of stars from our Milky Way galaxy. Being relatively close, it is dimmer than expected because it is quite close to the galactic plane and hence highly obscured by interstellar matter in the Milky Way. More supernovae have been observed in this galaxy than any other galaxy known, a total of 9 supernova events. The reason for this is not known. And finally, on that early morning of May 6th, under the nearly full moon, as sunrise was drawing near, I decided the obvious thing to do next was to stop fighting the moonlight and instead just embrace it. The moon has been Earth's partner for untold eons of time, most likely even co-evolving with our planet. Its influence has become intimately woven into the web of life that makes this planet one of the rare gems in the galaxy. It is ironic that as astronomers and astrophotographers, we all know that about the moon, and still, most of the time, we curse it. But truly, deep down, appreciation for the moon is there, for its beauty and timelessness and significance to our shared human history and importance to our planetary ecosystem. So, I turned my telescope toward it that night as a final act to recognize its unchallenged dominance of the night sky and once again capture its timeless beauty. To take this image of the entire moon, I changed my camera to the ASI 533 MC Pro. Compared to the 678 MC planetary camera I was using, the 533 has a significantly larger sensor. I only captured and stacked 60 seconds of video images to generate this photo. At 99% full, only a slight shadow on the bottom left of this moon image is evident, obstructing what would otherwise appear to be a nearly perfect sphere. Despite the high-level clouds early that morning, I think it's a good picture. Before ending this video, let me also share with you a couple of my best moon images taken several months ago. For this, I used the ASI 678 MC planetary camera and a 3x Barlow lens for maximum magnification. The telescope was once again the SV503 80ED refractor from SVBony. With that 3x Barlow, the apparent focal length achievable was 1,680 millimeters. On that night of November 9th, 2022, there also was a nearly 100% full moon. And shown on this lunar picture, the red boxes mark the field of view of 2 images that I captured and will show you in the next 2 slides. Despite imaging challenges on the night of May 5th caused by the moonlight and high-level clouds, I felt the need to get out under the stars. It had been way too long. My addiction to astrophotography was reaching a state of severe withdrawal symptoms. In the several weeks prior, there were very little opportunities due to the spring rain and the constant cloud cover. I made this video because I think it illustrates the complex planning, equipment choices, logical thinking, and science involved if you intend to also do battle with the moon for deep sky imaging. The M92 Globular Cluster and the Fireworks Galaxy were new targets and images added to my ever-expanding portfolio of deep sky objects. And as happens often, and you saw, not everything was ideally executed. But with some follow-ups employing the lessons learned, the final images presented here were perhaps respectable. Dawn finally arrived as I was packing up my equipment. It is now quite noticeable how short the nights are becoming, with the spring morning twilight putting an end to my astro imaging around 4 a.m. Summer is approaching, and the Milky Way season will soon be here, offering new exciting opportunities for nebula imaging. Thank you kindly for joining me for another episode of Astrophotography Japan. Here's wishing you clear skies and time to enjoy them. My name is Paul Cheesegel, and I am an astrophotographer.
ベルギービール6本入ってるベルギービールギフトボックス欲しい方いらっしゃいますか？お